Hello, everybody. Obviously, welcome to this month's instalment of the Cisilion webinar series, What's New in Microsoft? Obviously, today we'll be focusing on how we could be doing more with M365. So to kick off, I was going to run through a quick agenda as to what we'll be covering off today, as well as introducing this amazing team of experts that I've got with me on this webinar today. So yeah, we'll cover off obviously what's happening currently in 2023. What organizations, are organizations aware of what in their M365 and are they adopting it? Looking at how organizations can simplify and consolidate their IT estates into M365, as well as looking at how removal and duplicate technologies can help reduce IT spend and obviously increase functionality. Make sure the right licenses are the right people, right sizing that M365 licensing estate, as well as looking at what's on the roadmap for Microsoft, obviously with the recent announcements of Chat, GPT, and Copilot. And then at the end, obviously, we'll have some time for question and answers. So obviously, please feel free to leave some comments and we can look to address those as we're going along, or obviously cover that off at the end. So obviously introducing everybody. I'll start off. Obviously, my name's Gordon Edwards. I'm an account director here at Cisilion, mainly focused around our Microsoft portfolio and offerings. Obviously, I'll let the rest of the dream team introduce themselves. Don't know if you want to start, Max?
Yep, thank you very much. Max Meiklejohn. I am an adoption consultant. Our organisation focuses wholly on helping organisations and their people to get the best out of their investments in Microsoft technologies. I'll pass to Sami.
Yeah, hi guys. My role is a Microsoft solution specialist, and my job is to help customers understand all of the relevant products available in Microsoft's cloud suite, and wherever possible, optimize those to make sure you're never wasting money on unnecessary products.
And that leaves me. So I'm Sam Baxter. I'm one of the solution architects here at Cisilion. I focus on the M365 stack. And really my job is all around talking to customers about where they are today, where they want to be, and how they get there.
Brilliant. Obviously, thank you very much, everyone, for joining me today to talk through this. So, yeah, I'm sure everyone's aware 2023 has been quite an interesting year when it comes to the way companies and organizations are looking at their IT estates, specifically around IT spend, hot topic at the moment. I know it feels like we never stopped talking about COVID and obviously the impacts it had around the ways we work. But, it's 3 years down the line now and approaching that 36-month contract term for a lot of companies. Obviously, since lockdown began, a lot of companies now in the process of reviewing those agreements and looking at, is that the right solution? Where can they optimize that? Especially when they look at those solutions that were rapidly deployed and rolled out as a direct result of remote working. And obviously ensuring that the right technology is in the right place to enable that productive and secure working environment. Obviously 3 years down the line, a lot of people now do have a clearer strategy as to the way they want those organizations to work. So now those conversations are tending to happen with lots of customers around what's the right solution and how does that work within their Microsoft journey. Obviously, combining that with the current economic climate at the moment, a lot of IT departments are being tasked to do all of that, but also review their IT spend and looking at how they can optimize, how they can consolidate their IT infrastructure and IT estate, especially obviously with the recent price increases that have come from major vendors likes of Microsoft and Cisco included. On top of everything as well, 2023 has also seen a huge jump in the number of cyber attacks. So security is paramount for everyone at the moment. I think the latest stats is over 80% of organizations have actually received at least one cyber attack in the last 3 to 6 months. So obviously with this being at the forefront of many IT leaders, I think a really good place to start for me is looking at how much of M365 the majority of customers actually use. And I think probably one for you, Max. Obviously, your experience of working with customers since lockdown and over the last 3 years, do you feel as though people are actually using what they're even paying for today in M365?
Well, we work with customers across pretty much every vertical, whether it's public sector, private sector, finance, education, healthcare, whatever it might be. And we tend to find that I think the last 3 years has accelerated people's kind of proximity, let's say, to some of the more modern working practices, but actually really getting the best out of it is a different thing. I think there was almost panic adoption, might be the word I'd use, over the COVID period, where people started to use tools like Teams, but probably using it more like it's Zoom. So there's like a point solution where they're doing video calls and they're able to interact and contact people. And what we're really seeing now is a lot of organizations coming to terms with the way their teams want to work, which is this hybrid model, which is, we spend a few days in the office, we spend a few days at home, it's a lot more flexible, managing meetings where some people are virtual and some people aren't, managing teams where they're a lot more virtual. I know from our perspective, we deliberately don't have a catchment area in terms of the people that we employ. Everyone's asked to work remotely, we get together every quarter, but there is a reality that we want to work in a way that is flexible and suits people's lives. And so creating those ways of working is now the responsibility of the organization, because in my experience all up in every organization I work with, there are very, very few employees who spend their time thinking, you know what, I'm going to look into Microsoft 365 and all its features and functions and work out how I can interpret the functionality that exists to underpin my performance. We all work, being honest, in very traditional ways until someone else comes along and says, we need to do things differently. There is a more effective way of doing it. And so the process, and increasingly we're going through with lots of organizations at the moment, is actually looking at how people are working. It's like a discovery process that underpins or starts the strategy that they want to drive their kind of Microsoft journey, is understanding all the different roles and responsibilities and what they interact with, how they use it, who they interact with, how they collaborate today, and not just assume that they're getting the best from it or that they could get the best from it. It's then taking the organization's responsibility to say, right, let's find the best ways of working and make the enablement available to the users in a way that they can digest and actually utilize. Just moreover, to give some examples, we're working with household brands, and these are the sorts of organizations that you would expect to be at the forefront of technology kind of use and adoption, because they have massive budgets, they do have massive IT departments. But I think that's the crossover we're starting to see really, is IT are starting to take more responsibility for the utilization of these, and actually IT becoming the enabler in an organization as opposed to just providing technology. Increasingly we're seeing IT with the preserve and crossing over into the business with things like HR as well, and with key business decision makers in terms of making sure that the IT is underpinning the performance of people, not just being put in as technology with the promise that it will make everyone more efficient. It's actually creating the process to make people more efficient. So one example is we're working with an enormous retailer at the moment. They've got 50,000 staff. They have E5 across the board. So the full gamut of licensing from Microsoft. They've got all the toys to play with, but they only have 2,000 people using OneDrive. They don't have any real policies that determine where people are storing things and how they should behave on kind of any of the key applications. They've never really had any formal training for users, despite the fact that they've got access to all the technology. People have been left to kind of work it out. And they even have pockets of things like people using Zoom and Slack and Teams. And it's just a bit of a mishmash of technologies that have been, to go back to the term, kind of panic bought over the COVID period. That means that they're now in a position that they need to simplify, consolidate some cost, and develop those foundational ways of working across the organization. Sorry, Gordon, that might have been a long-winded response.
No, I mean, it's a very key point. While a lot of organizations, procuring a license and enabling it within your environment is only step one. If you're only, you mentioned there obviously full E5, you've got the full toolbox to play with. If you're not using it, the return of investment there is obviously quite low. I mean, out of people who adopted E5, would you say is it a large proportion of organizations are using all of it, or is it 50% of people are using it? Or how are you finding that engaging with your customers?
Honestly, I would suggest that it's a really small percentage that really get the best out of it, and it's generally those people who are into technology and intrigued and have gone out to find it for themselves. And because the vast majority of people don't, they turn up to do their job, and they functionally know how to do their job using email, and they've learned a bit about Teams and they can use that. And if they are doing it, they've been told where to store stuff, but that's about as far as it goes. The depth of capability that exists within the Microsoft suite, which is built around the guiding principle of enabling people and organizations to do more. That's the whole purpose of the whole suite. It goes underutilized enormously. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the changes that Microsoft are bringing in. Building those foundations is essential, and I won't steal anyone's thunder, I'm sure, going forward, but we have to get that stuff right as organizations in order to enjoy the benefit of the investments we've made, but actually the progress that Microsoft are developing in terms of the new features and functions that are coming out.
No, definitely. I mean, it's interesting you say about the panic buy. I think a couple of years ago when COVID did happen and people reacted and everyone went to market to find these, the new security, the cloud-based that enables remote working. And probably a bit more technical one for you, Sam. Obviously, M365 has come a long way in the last 3 years. Do you think this is affecting people's decision-making process around the Microsoft technologies leading into this next financial year?
Yeah, I think it is. I think if I start off with a broad statement, which is I sort of sympathise with IT teams today, because it's an ever-changing landscape. Especially if we're looking at the last 3 years, which is sort of the subject of this conversation, but that change in working from home and everything else, but also the Microsoft stack has come a long way since then. So for people to stay on top of that and realize what it can do, aligned to your day-to-day job, that's tricky. And that's where we come in and have that conversation to talk about, what can it do for you now? Because, quite rightly, a few years ago, people had that conception around Microsoft, well, it's not really a security player, is it? It's not what it is today, but, massive investment from their side. And, if you're looking at the Forrester and Gartner reports, you're seeing that Microsoft have gone from that bottom left to that top right. If the Defender for Endpoint is what is the market leader, really, or one of the market leaders, and that's an AV solution. So actually what we're seeing from a lot of customers is them moving away, or the conversation around moving away from the AV they've got today to start making use of that. And that's just one of a suite of tools within the M3, not only the M365 licensing, but on a smaller business front, the business premium licensing, because Microsoft's bringing all of that functionality down to small businesses to protect them as well. So really, when you look at the entire Defender suite, you're protecting those endpoints, you're protecting emails through Defender for O365. You've got Azure Active Directory and conditional access, where you're putting in multi-factor authentication, blocks 99.9% of phishing attacks. That's what we're looking at today and what we're working with customers at. So really, it's about tackling that preconception that Microsoft aren't a big player, because they are in the security front. And going back to the change in landscape, another massive area that organizations are having to deal with now is data. What data do they have today? How do they stop that from leaving an organization? How do they tackle things like internal risk from their users? Things where it was maybe more of a slap of a wrist guidance back in the day is now a very serious matter. And so organizations are looking to get a handle on that and using something like Purview, which is, sits within the licensing. It's a leading tool as well around understanding data and adhering to information governance. All of these things are sort of a treasure chest of tools that customers already have, and we can help them realize and understand. I'm just talking about the security pieces here. Obviously, within that M365 suite, you've got tools like Intune, right? So especially in the world of hybrid work, where you've gone beyond the border of your traditional office, and you need to keep track of that and track of those devices. Intune is a way to manage that, and combining that with something like Defender for Endpoint, protecting those devices where they go. But not enough is said about the productivity gains of using things like Autopilot and Intune to provision your devices. We're working with customers and we're streamlining that bit where their IT teams spend days and days, or weeks, a year, depending on their size, just building new computers for new starters, right? And it's all about saving that time for usually an already overwhelmed desk that they can use, going from firefighting to those transformation pieces that really start driving that change for an organization.
Sorry, Sam. Obviously, like you're saying, all organizations from their IT, they need to have something in place, be it Microsoft, be it Cisco, whatever the vendor is. They tend to have something in place for communication, collaboration, identity, looking at data, looking at devices, and looking at the users. Obviously, from what you're saying, is a lot of this is actually already in the M365 license, and therefore people are paying extra for duplicate technologies.
That's right, and there is that sprawl from trying to make things work in COVID times, and people are still, I'm talking to customers now. People are still using those edge technologies. People are using things like Dropbox and stuff, and they've got OneDrive. They're still communicating through other systems like WhatsApp when they could be using Teams. It's these sort of things where you as an organization don't have control over that. You can gain control over that, but you need to understand it first. And part of the suite is cloud app discovery, and you can use that to build a picture of what's being used today within your organization. And really, and this sort of definitely touches on what Max talks about, but really we encourage a lot of organizations to look at that and understand it. I know there's sort of this inclination to be like, you shouldn't be using that. Why are you using that? But really, it's if you want to be effective with it and that transition and consolidating those technologies, it's understanding why those people are using those today. Because there's, in the last couple of years, they've obviously established some business channels through that, and it won't help to cut it off. It just makes sense to understand that and transition, and it's really helping IT teams talk to their users and understand effective transition. And to be honest, these new technologies, in especially in the security space, are often better than the tools being used today. And part of what we do is helping people understand that, when you're looking at Defender for Endpoint, you've got attack surface reduction rules, which other AVs may not have. What you're talking about there is looking at the estate you've got of devices today and looking at the threat campaigns that are out there. Microsoft gathers all that information. There's trillions of signals they're gathering and understanding and feeding into their threat intelligence, and looking at your devices today and going, okay, what processes have we got? What vulnerabilities do we have today which we can reduce and reduce that attack surface reduction?
So it sounds very much like it's a combination of user adoption and technology working together to make sure they get the most out of that M365 licenses that they've already purchased.
Yeah, and there's I don't know how much more time I have, but probably the last point I'll make is that all of these Microsoft tools, they work together. There's synergy there, and you're using the security center in Microsoft, if you're not using something like Sentinel, to collect all of this information and have one pane of glass for your IT teams to work on and to respond to. At present, if you've got third-party tools everywhere, the likelihood is that you've got a load of portals to log into to try and manage that, and you've got no unified approach. So really, touching back on that bit about time saving, if you've got one portal and it's doing a lot of the intelligence for you, that's going to save your IT teams a lot of effort. And not just that, but when they've got the time, they can do the job well, and things aren't missed.
No, definitely. Obviously, getting the most out of your licensing all comes down to exactly what licenses you've actually got. So I don't know, Sami, if you probably lean on yourself here and your experience of working with customers about doing that right sizing, looking at when you do look to consolidate into M365. It sounds like a bit of robbing Peter to pay Paul, replacing one product, reinvesting that money into M365. Is that the sort of thing you're feeling around tailoring that to people's individual needs?
Yeah, the culture, I think we've still got almost a hangover from the previous culture of licensing on-premise technology, where you would be encouraged to just buy a product across the entire business and you would just make use of that where and when you had to use it. It was viewed as a capital investment that's done, and then you'd almost ignore it for 3 years. And then if you were really looking to get the latest and greatest, you would just renew software assurance. But now that model's changed into a continuous billing cycle down to typically an annual basis now. And that means that you are always incentivized to choose which licenses for which users, which actually has a direct commercial benefit. Whereas before it wasn't as easy to do that, it probably wouldn't be worth the exercise. And there's two routes here for customers that still haven't made that transition. It's really about making sure you're getting it right from the get-go and understanding the different personas within your business so that you're able to license them correctly from the beginning. And there may be plenty of users in your environment that don't need Office, they don't need large mailboxes, and it's about making sure we get the right balance of SKUs for those, and also build in an actual pathway to get them using the technology correctly, based on the license that they've got. So it takes a little bit more work, but the result hopefully is a return on investment way greater than if you were to just buy a SKU, deploy it, and see what happens. And we do a lot of work with clients now where we effectively look at the data. So Microsoft have something called the Graph, which is an API fabric layered into the entire Office 365 suite. And it has lots of different points in there to be able to just go and get this data. We can tell who's actually using Office, how big are these mailboxes, who's using OneDrive and SharePoint actively, and then using the right tools, very quickly understand what's the right license for them, regardless of what they're what they're currently licensed with today. But it doesn't always necessarily mean you just rip away the license and give them the cheaper one. It's also about understanding, well, would their role benefit from the technology? Just no one's actually told them they've got access to it yet. And I think that's an exercise it's actually an investment in your people and an investment in process that's going to lead to that end result being more effective workers within your organization. And now that we're seeing the dawn of natural language processing come into Office 365, you're lowering that barrier for users to start using the stack more effectively. So by literally being able to tell Office 365 what you want it to do, go and find this data for me, bring it back, summarize it, turn it into a presentation, all within a few sentences, I think people are going to want to use it more than ever before, as opposed to you having to tell them to use it.
No, definitely. I think it rolls quite nicely into also my next question, obviously being around what's new in Microsoft. The latest announcement of Copilot obviously went live in Dynamics about a month ago, coming to M365, coming to security, and looking at all that piece. I suppose I open the floor to everyone. What's everyone's thoughts on the new exciting future of Copilot? Anyone want to go?
I think things are about to explode. I think we're going to see almost a second renaissance in adoption and actual usage of these platforms. The craziest thing is we've got applications like Power Automate, Power Apps, that they require just that little bit more expertise than your typical user has. However, now you're able to interact with it in a way which is way more approachable. So I think we're going to see this trend of just, it's effectively like a low code solution. We're moving into a no code solution where you can just talk to effectively a chatbot who will then spit out an application that works. And you just have to test it once and you'll be confident in it and off you go.
Yeah, I think looking at some of the different areas as well, like especially what they're doing on the security piece and the demos around that, just really impressive. Being able to just quit, instead of having to search through stuff, which can take a lot of time, just going, yeah, tell me about this, and it will give you that piece. But really, one of the really cool bits that I saw was them giving a bit of code and going, okay, well, this is what they used to attack, and it goes, okay, well, I'll just reverse engineer this for you and build you a map and goes, this is where it landed, this is what it did, it ran through PowerShell, blah 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 blah. Like, as a security analyst, that's going to be invaluable to you, and really it just lowers the bar, right? This is it. It's just making it easier. I think Microsoft has got quite poetic about people don't want to be doing the drudgery of day-to-day tasks, Excel, Word, everything else. It's about being creative and utilizing these tools to be able to help you do the things that excite you and you want to do. Write me this presentation, do this, do that. I don't want to have to do it myself, and allowing people to be more productive in that way.
From my perspective, and kind of with the user hat on, and we talked right at the very beginning about the fact that users aren't really utilizing the kind of features, functions that are available to them. What Copilot does is, in a really simple way, it enables the user, without them even realizing it, to unlock some of those features and functions that otherwise they don't even know exists. The example being, if they're building a PowerPoint, lots of people aren't particularly great with PowerPoint. They just put some bullets in and use it in its most basic function, but it will help them create something that looks amazing, that delivers the message in a lot better way. It restructures what they would necessarily write. It helps them to create a much better output without them knowing the features and functions that they're actually using within the particular application. So it is an incredible step forward in user-based technology. There is obviously massive caveats with it, as there always is with these things, in that in order for you to be able to get to all of that really clever functionality that layers across all of the different applications that Microsoft make available to users, you've got to start being able to use the technology and adopt the technology that underpins it. So you have to be saving your documents in the right way. You have to have governance that dictates where people are saving documents and what they have access to. Because as clever as the AI is, it needs guidance in order for it to be able to go and suck data and information and bring that back to you. If it's not there, it can't do it. So I think, and I agree wholly with Sami, I do think there will be an explosion, but I think there is no leapfrogging, unfortunately, the foundational work that needs to happen in getting the organization effective and efficient using the key applications that Copilot will exist over the top of. So the way it's pitched in a lot of the kind of things that I've seen is it's all the what you can get from it, and it's all amazing, but there are some steps to get there, to be fair. And it is important to understand.
And I think the governance point that you touched on there is, I think people need to be very, very careful with that, because, and this goes back 10 years ago, when we were telling customers to move to OneDrive and SharePoint. We said, you may not realize it, but you've got lots of files in these various drives that have sensitive information, and you're about to make all of that searchable. And still to this day, there's loads of data in SharePoint that you would probably not want some of your users seeing from different departments. They have access to it because you never locked it down. Now we're about to layer on an AI that can go and get that for you, and anyone can use that tool. So right now, governance and security, making sure you've got the right policies applied to your various libraries is more important than ever, especially if you're about to give people this license, which I think you definitely need to, because the market will drive that competition, and you'll have to use it to stay relevant, I think, within the future of pretty much every industry. But you need to be really wary of the downside, which is it may just open up your users to way more information than you ever realized they had access to in the first place. So I think using tools like information protection plan to automatically start encrypting data within your environment is a very necessary tool, more than ever, because otherwise you may find files start disappearing out of your control.
I suppose it's almost like Microsoft have dangled the carrot. Here's the art of the possible, the Microsoft phrasing, the art of the possible. But like you say, Max, it's without that foundational layer, it's only as good as what you put in. And like you said, Sami, that the risk to rolling that out almost adds more value into that consolidating all of your IT solutions into M365, because now there's this new shiny toy that can make the most out of it if you are heavily invested in the M365 stack. So, anyone else to comment on Copilot, or should we open up to see if there's any questions from people?
I think we've covered Copilot quite well.
Yeah, well, I encourage everyone to do their homework on it to get ahead of what's coming. Definitely. Have you, Sam? Have you had a go with it yet, with any of the GPT stack?
I have had a go with the GPT stuff. I haven't had a go with the Copilot stuff yet. I mean, even in the demos, they're like, take it with a pinch of salt, which is fair enough. Because that's what it's new. Like all things new, it needs time, right, to get right.
Yeah, well, I think one of the most amazing things about it that I think is the transcripting in Teams. So pretty much every single meeting that you have in your day today in your professional life will be recorded, transcribed, and then searchable by anybody who needs access to that. And you may miss a meeting, but there might have been some really valuable things in that meeting. You can get that summarized in one paragraph straight away.
Oh, I don't want to be held to what I say. That sounds dangerous.
There you go. No one does. Yeah. These are another governance choice for IT to make that they probably don't want to be responsible for.
Just add it to the list, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So obviously, if anyone watching has got any questions for the team, obviously feel free to contact Cisilion at any point. We can answer any of those questions. And also for those people who are looking to really get the most out of M365, Cisilion are actually able to help you guys with a free M365 review workshop, where we help you to look at what you're using today. Are you adopting what you're using today? And how can you consolidate third-party solutions into M365 to help both reduce cost and obviously increase functionality as well? So I'll put a link to the workshop in the comments section. If anyone's got any questions or wants to just talk to an expert or talk to like Sam, Sami, or Max, obviously do get in contact. And if not, hopefully see you all on next month's What's New in Microsoft. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.